When I was growing up in the 1950s, I did not think it was possible for girls and women to become firefighters. I was tired of having people say to me, "You can't do that because you're a girl." I think it's so important that younger women know this history, that they realize that the opportunities that they have today didn't just sort of like get handed to them. Social change is a marathon and not a sprint.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Captain Brenda Berkman, a pioneering female firefighter.
Wow, I can't see anybody. It's a little disorienting. Well, thank you. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me and for creating that great video. And thank you all for being here today. Hasn't it been a great opening session so far? Carla and the previous panel, I think they've just done a fantastic job in opening up the discussion for you all. I'm going to shift the program a little bit from Carla's words of inspiration and also the previous panel's words of discussion and statistics, insights about the status of where we are today, and talk to you a little bit more about a personal experience as a change maker. When I was growing up in the 1950s and 1960s, heroes rarely looked like me. There were few role models that existed outside of teachers, nurses, secretaries, and homemakers. This is a picture of me at the age of 2.5. And little girls were, maybe they would have a party fire helmet on, but we did not see any women at all in lots of different roles. Certainly we saw no women firefighters. I was a good student in school, and I also loved sports. But at that time in the United States, there were very few opportunities for women in sports, not like today in most of the world. But despite that lack of opportunity, I played every sport that I could. There's a picture of me when I was skiing. My parents and my teachers gave me a very strong desire to help other people. So as a kid, I studied hard and participated in many different kinds of volunteer work. I organized charity fundraisers. I also got involved in political forums. This was as a kid. I was outspoken, for a girl especially, and I felt strongly that because of the lack of opportunities that I saw for girls and young women, that I needed to do something to achieve more equality for women. So after college, I thought, what would be a better way to try and change society than to become a lawyer? So I went to New York University to study the law. But at the same time, I was still interested in work that was not only helping people, but also physically demanding. So I became a lawyer, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, because while I was still in law school, in my last year of law school, something happened that would radically change the course of my life. And that something was that the city of New York allowed women to apply to become firefighters for the first time in 1977. So prior to 1977, it didn't matter if you were a Olympic caliber athlete, if you had won the title of strongest woman in the world, if you happened to have been born female, you were not even allowed to apply to become a New York City firefighter. This is what, well, this is a little old. This is what the fire department looked like even up until 1982. All men, 12,000 of them, and the quota for women was 0. You were not even allowed to apply if you were a woman. And that was true for the paid fire departments all over the United States and indeed all over the world. The first women to be hired as paid firefighters in the United States and in other places like the United Kingdom and the Netherlands were hired in the mid-1970s. That was only 40 years ago. But because New York City Fire Department was the largest fire department in the world and the largest in the United States by far, a tremendous amount of attention was focused on the fact that New York City was allowing women to apply for the first time. So when women were first allowed to apply to take the firefighter exam in New York City, the physical abilities part of the test, not the written part of the test, but the physical abilities part that was supposed to determine if you had the physical abilities to be trained to do the firefighter job was changed. Big surprise. To make that part of the test to be more difficult. It was no surprise that none of the approximately 90 women who actually showed up to take that part of the exam, even after being told that it would be impossible for any woman to pass, including myself, 90 of us approximately among 10,000 men, none of those women passed that part of the exam. So as I was training for, and then as I took that part of the exam, the physical part, I came to believe that the test did not actually measure the physical abilities, the real physical abilities that were needed to be trained to become a New York City firefighter, and that the test was set up to discriminate against women. It turns out that testing experts supported me in that belief. So in 1978, when I was in my last year of law school, I sued the New York City Fire Department to force it to use tests for firefighter that were actually related to the abilities needed to be a firefighter. Deciding to bring that lawsuit was hard because I was the only person who stepped out from the crowd to challenge that unfair test. Immediately, I began to experience harassment because of my lawsuit. Now you can see here some of the articles that appeared. The wonderful headlines were basically they're ridiculing what is going on, you know, not with the language, 90 femmes flop in the fire test. You know, it was very dismissive of women even thinking about becoming firefighters, let alone challenging a test that the public believed was job-related. So I decided to challenge the test, even though I knew it was going to be very hard. And when I won, let's see if I can make this work. Oop, too much. When I won in 1982, that's when I started to experience a lot of harassment and discrimination, not only from some of my male firefighter coworkers, but also from the media, from politicians, from my own labor union, and even members of the public. I got death threats and pornography sent to my home. I was followed on the street and accosted, and people would just walk up to me because they'd seen my picture, just walk up to me and start yelling at me and threatening me. Finally, in 1982, after the fire department was forced to adopt a job-related test for hiring, and I won my lawsuit, I and the other women began to train to take the new test, and then about 40 of us passed. And here you see a photo of us at our swearing in. But passing that new test was really only the beginning of many barriers and discriminatory acts that we as new women had to face. We had demonstrations and protests that the public and the fire union and other firefighters organized at various public places. For instance, here, as we're being sworn in to go into the fire academy to be trained, there were demonstrators. You don't see them. They're in the back of us with holding signs up and yelling out things opposing our hiring. So we faced a very difficult time in the training academy because some of the instructors at the training academy decided that, you know, that yes, we'd won our lawsuit, I'd won my lawsuit, but they would have a second shot at getting rid of us in the training academy. So they started coming up with things to try and make us quit. And we were being tortured. I think that really that is an appropriate word. We were being discriminated against not only by the instructors, but also by our fellow male trainees, which was just unheard of. Different and more difficult standards were being applied in the training academy to the women than to the men. We were being evaluated differently than the men, more strictly. It was like trying to learn a new job, a difficult job in a fishbowl, which obviously it's very hard to perform to your highest level when you feel you're constantly under the gun with the threat of being fired. The fire department, even though they knew we were going to be hired, did not acquire the proper protective gear to fit the new women. They did nothing to equip the firehouses for us coming in. It took 30 years before the New York City Fire Department had finally equipped all of its firehouses with bathrooms and changing facilities for women. 30 years. There were many negative media stories that ridiculed us and told false stories about the women firefighters. There were physical, including sexual assaults and verbal assaults on women firefighters, both on and off the job. We had come into this, I want to bring this up with, bouncing off the social norm discussion that you heard just a little bit earlier. We were coming into a very tradition-bound organization, an organization where masculinity was identified with the job. So the men who were on the job actually identified their roles as men with the job that they held. The organization was very, very far from being gender neutral or at all welcoming to women. So when You know, Carla Harris talks about bringing your authentic self to the job. That sometimes is easier to say than to actually do when there's actually no encouragement within your organization to bring your authentic self to the job. When I got to my firehouse, the men refused to eat with me. Many of them even refused to talk to me. My air tank was drained, so when I went into a fire, I was never quite sure if I was going to have, protective equipment. This was the bumper sticker on all the men's cars. And you might be asking yourself at this point, why didn't I quit? Because I had discovered that while going into burning buildings requires courage, what required me to be really courageous was just refusing to quit a job that I loved and that I found out I could be good at. I also wanted to support the other women, and I felt that if I quit, that they then would lose hope and they might quit. And I put up with all this personal abuse because eventually I came to realize, and this is probably one of the most difficult lessons for us as women especially, because we're socialized to want everyone to like us. I came to realize that that abuse was not based on who I really am. I actually have a pretty good sense of humor, but you would not ever have known that about me when I was in the firehouse, because under no circumstances was I encouraged to be who I really was. Instead, all of that abuse was based on stereotypes and hate and fear of change. I realized that I had to stand up against the abuse and stand up for more opportunities for women. I believe that if people realized that women could be good at firefighting, people would come to understand that women could be good at anything. As time went by, I and the other women slowly achieved more acceptance. You know, this is a photo of me coming out of a burning building after we had just pulled an unconscious man from his burning apartment. I mean, honestly, there's no better feeling than knowing that you've just done something to help save somebody's life. The victories that I had, that the other women firefighters had, that our allies, including men allies, those victories showed that women can do the job. We also created organizations that had never existed before to help support women. Those organizations still exist. Our persisting led to more women being hired. I know you're going to find this statistic hard to believe as something that's a victory, but we now have more than 100 women out of almost 12,000 firefighters in New York. It only took us almost 40 years to get to that. We've had women that have been promoted all over the country, including to become the chiefs of their own departments. And now, best of all, we've created the environment where little girls and little boys can see women on the fire truck and realize that women can do anything. So I've faced a lot of challenges in the course of my career, including being a first responder at the World Trade Center on 9/11. But my career was not all doom and gloom. I received many honors for the work that I've done. I've had a lot of adventures. I've saved lives. I've been able to serve my city. I've traveled all over the world, including being honored to be here in Dubai. It's been fantastic. And now that I'm retired from firefighting, here's a few of the younger women firefighters who showed up for my last tour in the New York City Fire Department after 25 years. Now that I'm retired, I've found there's lots of other ways to help to serve people. So here I am after Hurricane Katrina with Habitat for Humanity. I organized a big group of women firefighters, and we went down there to rebuild houses. I have a kindergarten class in New York City named the Brenda Berkman Kindergarten Class. There they are with me. They're very cute. It's like being a rock star. They want to hug you. I become an artist. Here I am at printing stone lithographs. And I've also joined the board of a group that's putting the first statue honoring real women into New York's Central Park. The first statue of real women in New York Central Park in 167 years. I've learned that there's many ways to be a hero. When we act together, when we support each other, and I'm talking men and women, supporting each other in difficult situations, we help others achieve their dreams. You know, the important thing is to not close the door behind you when you've walked through that door, to not pull the ladder up behind you when you've climbed that ladder. Helping others achieve their dreams is heroic. And I hope that what you're able to take away from my talk today is the understanding that being courageous is not just a matter of physical bravery. It's more important to be morally brave. And by that, I mean to do acts of self-sacrifice and kindness, to question the accepted ways of doing things, to imagine what would it be like, because we don't have anything in front of us that shows us what it will be like, but to imagine what would it be like to have full gender equality. Whatever path you choose to pursue, you need to find others to support you, and you need to support others. You need to support women who are blazing trails, women like myself who are blazing trails in fields that are very different from the trails that Carla Harris has blazed in finance or in music. You need to find and support women that are doing things that are very different from your own passions. Don't expect the world to change overnight. You know, as it said in my video, it's really the truth that change making is a marathon and not a sprint. But if you don't do it, if we don't do it, then who is going to be the change maker? I want to thank you for listening to my story. I want to ask you to remember those whose struggles have made a path for you. I want you to be brave. Shukra.